And now we're going to model a few things for the computer desk. So let's go ahead and zoom in here. And we're going to take a part from this wall so that we have the modifiers applied. So we're going to duplicate that part and then move it up. Let's set our origin to geometry and then let's move it like that. And now in the edit mode, we're going to go ahead and extrude it. And then we're going to set an inset. And then using the vertex selection mode, we're going to select this bottom vertex and this one. And then we're going to move, actually we have to turn off the proportional editing, and then we can just move it up to give it a bit of a chin. And select everything, add bevel weight. And then select this face and add an extrusion. Select everything, add bevel weight. And for this face, you can just adjust the depth using the scale on the x-axis. You can grab it or scale it. Okay, and now we're going to enter into isolation mode by pressing the / key. Select this back face, duplicate that, and then select the face, tap into edit mode, and scale it down. Now we're going to add an extrusion like that, add another extrusion, select this bottom face, and now we can add the isolation mode. And sort of eyeball the stand, so we're going to extrude it until we reach that ground part. Like that, and then add a loop cut, move it closer to the ground, and select this face and extrude it out. Select everything and add a bevel weight. Select the monitor and move it down slightly, and then select the stand, click on the monitor and press Ctrl P and parent the object, and then we can scale both of these down slightly and sort of move it down. And adjust the placement a little bit. So we're going to go ahead and grab it and adjust the placement like that. Let's go ahead and create a keyboard in this area. So to do that, we can take a piece from the stand and then separate that. Select that piece and move it on the x-axis, set our origin point to geometry. And we might need to clear the parent, so Alt P to open the clear parent menu, and then clear the parent and keep transform. Tap into edit mode, select everything and scale it up. And we're going to zoom out so that we can sort of eyeball the size and then scale it on the x-axis. And now we can add an extrusion like that. Add an inset. And then add an extrusion towards the bottom like that. Select everything, add the bevel weight. And let's go to the front view by pressing 1 on the numpad, enable the X-ray mode, switch to the vertex selection mode, select these two top vertices and move them up like that to give it a bit of an angle. Okay, let's take a look. I think the size is a little too big for my liking, so we're going to just make it a bit smaller. Now we're going to select this bottom face, duplicate that, separate by selection, and select that new face. Tap into edit mode, add a loop cut and type 10 loop cuts on the keyboard. And we're going to go ahead and add these. And then let's add about 4 loop cuts on this side. And we're going to go ahead and add a bevel, just a tiny bit. So let's go ahead and add a tiny bit bevel with no loop cuts between them. Like that. And we're going to go ahead and delete these faces. Let's go to the top view and select these edges. So we just need to select these edges and then we can add a tiny bit bevel. Let's add a tiny bevel just like the other one and then get rid of these faces. Select everything and extrude it up like that. Select everything, add bevel weight to it. And now click anywhere in this empty area to deselect everything, and then to create keys. For example, we need to create one big spacebar in this area. What we can do is hover a cursor over the button and press L button, and that's gonna select linked, which means that you can select the parts that are inside an object but are not connected with each other. So this is gonna make it really easy to go over these buttons and select them, and then we can just delete these vertices, and then we can select this face, and then we can just sort of move it and adjust it to create a bigger button. If it's a little too laggy, what you can do is, for now you can sort of disable the subdivision surface, and then it should be more smoother to work with, and then we can enable it afterwards. And for this button, I'm just gonna go ahead and select it and get rid of it. Select this face and grab it to adjust it a little bit. Select this side face and make this button a bit tinier, and then move this one out like that. And now we can enable our subdiv modifier. And then in the front view, we might need to rotate this just slightly, like that, and then move it slightly up. Okay, and let's just adjust our position a little bit to place it something like there. And then we're going to create a mouse pad and a mouse in this area. And to do that, we can just take one of the face from this button, and let's just move it on the y-axis and set our origin point to geometry. Select everything and scale it up. And then we're going to add an extrusion like that. Add the bevel weight. Select this top face and scale it just a tiny bit down and move it on the z-axis, and then move it up. And then we're just going to adjust the position like that. And for the mouse, I think we can add a, we can sort of scale it back up and move it down because it's a little too thick. And then for the mouse, we can create that using a plain object, or we can also do that using a circle. So let's add a circle with 10 sides, and then we're going to scale it down and go to the top view. And then in the vertex selection mode, we're going to select these vertices and move them along the x-axis like that. And just adjust the position a little bit, fill it, and then move it out like that, and then scale. Just adjust the position a little bit, and then add a subdiv modifier, shade the object smooth. Add a loop cut to sort of keep a shape. And then select some of these front vertices and move them on the x-axis slightly. Now that we have the mouse and keyboard created, let's just zoom in here, shift right click to move our 3D cursor and add a circle. And then using the edit mode, we're going to scale it down, fill it up, and extrude it up like that. And then we're going to inset that. Now, if you're moving this by extruding it down and you can't see the inside, with Blender 4.0, we have a new feature where you can hold down Alt key and then middle mouse button, and that's going to let you move your camera even when you're doing something like extrusion. And now you just adjust it and then click to finish it. And now we're going to go ahead and add about 5 loop cuts, and then we're going to select these 2 faces, Alt E to open the edge menu and bridge edge loops, and let's increase the number of cuts. Let's go with about 8 loop cuts, and then we're going to add a subdiv modifier and shade this smooth. And now we just need to add some supporting loop cuts. So let's add about 2 loop cuts in this area, and then add a single loop cut in this area, one up here for the handle, and then maybe add a single loop cut here, and then we can just bevel that. And maybe we can also add sort of one down there and one up here. And now we're going to go ahead and create a gaming console down there. So let's go ahead and zoom in on this area. Shift right click to move our 3D cursor, add a plane object. And then in the edit mode, we're going to go ahead and scale it down. Scale it even further down like that. And then we're going to shift click on walls and copy the modifiers. Now with that new object selected, we're going to go ahead and extrude it up. Select everything, add bevel weight to it. And let's just scale it down on the x-axis slightly. Also, let's just shade it smooth. And then we can go ahead and select these two edges. And then we're going to go ahead and bevel these with 2 loop cuts. And let's just create a button in this area. Let's select all 3 faces and then add an inset. And let's make sure that there is no bevel weight applied to these. And then we can add in tiny extrusion like this. And then we're going to go ahead and select this face and duplicate it. Separate by selection, tap into edit mode, select it, and then extrude it out, and then add the bevel weight to it. I think this is a little too thick, so let's just go to extreme mode, select some of these vertices, and move them slightly on the y-axis like that. And then we're going to do the same thing for this object. And let's set our origin point to geometry. Select this controller, this part of the controller, and add a mirror modifier. Turn off the x-axis and use this as the mirror object and set it to y-axis. Let's go ahead and create some buttons in this area, and shift right click on top of this, add a circle with 10 sides, and then we can just scale it down. Fill it up, extrude just a tiny bit like that. And then we can bevel it with maybe 2 loop cuts, and then add a subdiv modifier and shade it smooth, and add a supporting loop towards the bottom side like that. Let's move it slightly inwards. Let's go to the top view, and we're going to duplicate this button. Select both of these buttons and duplicate them again. And let's shift right click here, add a circle, and then in edit mode we're going to scale it down. Fill it up, extrude it out like this, add a tiny inset, extrude out, scale it up, add an extrusion, add another extrusion, and then add an inset and then extrusion towards the inside, and scale it down, and then add 1 more inset. Let's add subdiv modifier, shade it smooth, and then we just need to add some supporting loops. So let's add 1 down there, 1 towards the top, 1 in this area, and just scale it down a little bit. Let's add 1 in this area, maybe 1 down here, and a few loop cuts in this area. And now in the X-ray mode, let's go to vertex selection mode, select these top vertices and move it down. And I think we can sort of scale it down, select everything and scale it down just a tiny bit, move it down a little bit, and in the top view we're going to sort of move it like that. So now at this point you just need to like adjust this and add minor tweaks. So we're going to select this center face, Ctrl+ to add to our selection, and then we can just move it slightly up. We need to grow even more, a little bit selection, so Ctrl+ and then just move it out like that. So just fine tune the shape to your liking until you're happy with it. It just takes a little extra time when you're fine tuning these things. And let's select all of these buttons, click on the controller and Ctrl+P and select parent that. Actually we should have copied this over, but okay, it's okay, we're going to clear the parents. Let's select all of these, Shift D to duplicate along the y-axis, move it there, and then rotate along the z-axis 180 degrees, And in the top view, we just need to adjust the positioning a little bit. So let's just drag it on the x-axis slightly like that. And then we're going to go ahead and clear the parent and keep the transformation. And then with these selected, we're going to select this part. And let's just parent that. So Control P and parent. Okay, so it's a little messy, but it's not a problem since we're already gonna sort of parent this to the screen anyways. So let's go ahead and do that. And we're gonna be moving this using this screen. And now let's duplicate the screen, separate by selection, and then we're gonna rotate this along the y-axis 90 degrees. Let's move it up like that. Add a bit of extrusion and add a bevel weight. And now we're going to go ahead and add a loop cut down there. Select this face, extrude it out like that, and select this face, extrude it up. Select everything, add the bevel weight, and using the X-ray mode, we might need to adjust this slightly like that. And let's just select some of these vertices and move them slightly down. Okay, and then we can select the console itself, rotate along the y-axis 90 degrees, move it along the z-axis, grab along the x-axis to just position that inside the stand. And maybe we can just select the controller and parent it to the stand. And now we just select it and grab it. And let's just place it there. And let's just scale everything up slightly, so that it looks a little more cute. Also, I think I'm going to scale up the mouse just a tiny bit. Okay, and I think we can go ahead and save our file now.